and you chose another man's hands over your honor.
The phone buzzed on the nightstand. Mark reached for it, the battalion staff office, number glowed on the screen. He answered, Sergeant Gale speaking. On the other end, the duty officer's voice was cool and steady. Sergeant, you are ordered to report to the commander's office at 0700, immediately. When had everything managed to go straight to hell? Don't scroll. The best is yet to come. Subscribe, hit like, and drop a comment. 12 hours earlier, Sergeant Mark Gale sat on the hard seat of a Humvee as it bounced along the roads of the Fort Irwin training area. Desert dust boiled up behind the truck in a long cloud. Mark dragged a sleeve across his sweaty brow. 3 weeks of punishing training under a blistering sun lay behind him, ranges, ruck marches, force-on-force drills. Now came the long-awaited ride back to base. He took off his helmet, set it on his knees, and worked the stiffness out of his neck. In his head, Mark was already home, in the small house just off post. He pictured his wife Emma's face, the smile he'd missed more than he liked to admit. Just a few more hours, and I'll hold her, he thought, fighting impatience. His phone buzzed in his pocket with a constant stream of messages from the guys, but Mark ignored them. He focused on one thing, getting to Emma as fast as possible. They'd barely spoken the last few days. The range had lousy reception. A few short texts. How are you? All good. Miss you. Her replies were brief, but Mark chalked it up to fatigue. Emma worked as a nurse at a local clinic, and her shifts wore her out as much as his training wore him out. Truth was, the gap between them hadn't opened yesterday. In 2 years, there had been 3 deployments, blown weekends, a missed anniversary. After Afghanistan, they'd even tried one session with a marriage counselor, but duty schedules and guarded silence over breakfast ate that effort alive. She lived to the rhythm of the clinic and night shifts. He lived to the rhythm of the post and field problems, 2 parallel days in different time zones, even under the same roof. She'll be happy when she sees me at the door, he hoped, smiling to himself. The Humvee braked hard by a hangar. Mark stood, his numb legs protesting. On the parade apron, a few sedans were already waiting, families meeting their soldiers. He hopped down onto the concrete and swung his heavy rucksack onto a shoulder. He didn't see Emma among the greeters. Maybe she was on shift and couldn't make it. That didn't bother him. He'd get in his car and be home in 20 minutes. Mark opened his front door with his key and stepped quietly into the entryway. The house was dim, the curtains half drawn. Emma, he called softly as he unlaced his boots and set down the ruck. No answer. In the living room, on the coffee table, sat 2 empty glasses and a bottle of red wine with only a little left in the bottom. His heart tightened. Company flashed through his mind. Emma sometimes invited friends over, but he and Emma hadn't really been drinking wine lately. A man's jacket lay carelessly over the back of the sofa. Mark walked closer and ran a hand over the fabric, definitely not his. On the floor beside it lay a pair of men's sneakers. A chill slid through him. From the stairs came the rustle of movement and a soft laugh, a man's voice. Mark froze in the middle of the room. The air seemed to thicken. From upstairs, Emma's startled voice carried down. Someone's here. The next moment, an unfamiliar man in a t-shirt appeared on the stairs. Seeing Mark, he hopped off the last step and stared, wide-eyed. Emma darted out behind him, wrapped in a robe. Her face had gone pale. Mark stood with his fists clenched, trying to decide if this was exhaustion-born hallucination. It wasn't. Everything was real. A stranger in his house, his wife stricken with fear, and the evidence of their evening all around him. Mark, Emma began, her voice shaking. Mark took a step forward, tension pulling every muscle taut. The man stepped up too, raising both hands, palms out, in a soothing gesture. Easy, man. It's not what you think, he started, oily and smooth. That did it. The word man from this intruder in Mark's own house landed like a slap. Shut up, the sergeant said, cold as ice. He knew this smug face, Troy Colber, a civilian IT contractor who had set up their home internet a few months back. So that's why he'd been stopping by. Emma threw herself between them as if to shield her lover. Mark, please, it's not what you think, she pleaded, eyes bright with tears. Mark ground his teeth. Not what I think, he shot back. You're with another man in our bed. What exactly is it not? He flicked his eyes toward the bottle and glasses. Colbert kept his mouth shut, wearing a crooked half-smile, like none of this rattled him. Silence congealed in the room, broken only by Mark's heavy breathing. At last Emma whispered, I can explain. It's a mistake. She set a cautious hand on his forearm, and Mark shook it off. He wanted to howl or punch through the wall, but instead he stepped back. Get dressed, he told his wife, voice like winter steel, looking away. He couldn't look at her right now. Emma nodded and hurried upstairs. Colbert stood mute. Mark met his eyes for the first time. Get out before I put a hole in your thick head, he barked. The man lifted a shoulder. Fine, I'm going. Sorry, man. He shrugged into his jacket. The lover slipped out the door, tossing over his shoulder. Take care, Sergeant. The door clicked shut. Mark stood in the middle of the living room, shaking with tension. He wanted to run after that bastard and deliver rough justice, but he held himself in check. Instead, he drove his fist into the doorframe. Pain shot up his arm, but it didn't deaden the ache in his chest. The home that had been his fortress had become the scene of betrayal. Emma appeared on the stairs, jeans and a sweater now, hair tousled, eyes swollen from crying. Mark, can we talk? What's there to say? His voice was cracked. How long has this been going on? A few months, she burst out. And yes, I'm guilty, but so are you. So you decided to find yourself some fun. Fun? Do you hear yourself? You pushed me to this. Always the army, the army, the army. Your ranges, rotations, one more report, and then bed. I spoke, you didn't listen. I cried, you didn't notice. You lived like you were in formation, even in the kitchen. Don't shift the blame. I am not shifting it. I'm owning mine. Will you own yours? Our anniversary, you were on duty. Weekends, you were out in the field. My night shifts, you didn't even ask how I got home. And when I begged you to talk, you tossed out, I'm fine, I'm tired, and disappeared into the shower like it was a bunker. I carried the load. I did what I had to do. And with me, you didn't have to. Am I your wife or a footnote in your schedule? You chanted it like a mantra. The army comes first. Fine, there you go. The army is first. I am last. That doesn't give you the right to bring a man into our home. I know, that's on me, but don't pretend this fell from the sky today. You've been edging me out with your shoulder for years until I was gone. You didn't lose me yesterday, you let me go when you chose the army over a conversation for the 100th time. Mark dragged a hand down his face, swallowing the rage. You realize we're done? This is the end. Just say it plain, it's convenient for you. The end, and back to formation you go. The army will excuse everything, right? He picked up his ruck. I'll sleep in the barracks. Of course you will. Where else? She laughed, bitter and hollow. Barracks, headquarters, the range, that's your real family. I'm filing for divorce, he said without looking back. Behind him a scream shattered into sobs. File it. Just say out loud, for once, we broke this, both of us. But you kept pushing. He stepped over the threshold and slammed the door. Cold evening air slapped his face. Mark stood on the porch, forcing his breath to even out. Inside him, everything boiled: pain, fury, despair. How could she? From the street, the house looked as cozy as ever, but now it was gutted on the inside, just like Mark. He went down the steps and walked slowly to his car in the driveway. When he started the engine, Mark didn't know where he would go. He wasn't going back home, not tonight. His heart pounded, blood drummed in his temples. He felt like he had after a firefight, except there were no gunshots here, just precision strikes against his trust and his love. A long night lay ahead. He needed to be alone so he wouldn't do something stupid. Mark gripped the wheel and pulled onto the road. At dawn, waking on a narrow bunk in the barracks, a place he'd begged a buddy to loan him for the night, Mark took a moment to recognize where he was. An empty room lined with metal lockers, a stranger snoring beyond the partition, definitely not home. Memory hit hard. Bitterness crawled up his throat again. He shut his eyes, trying to muffle the hurt. For even a few minutes there was a new day ahead, and he had to hold it together. The phone buzzed on the nightstand. Mark reached for it. The battalion staff office number glowed on the screen. He answered, Sergeant Gale speaking. The duty officer's voice was even. Sergeant, you are ordered to report to the commander's office at 0700. Immediately. Mark sat up, feet to the cold floor. Roger, he said automatically, but a chill ran through him. Had the commander already heard about his marriage blowing up, or had something happened to the unit? He threw himself together in a hurry, splashed a handful of cold water on his face at the sink, smoothed his short dark hair, pulled on a clean uniform, and jogged outside. The sun was just coming up, painting the horizon orange. He reached the headquarters building in a few minutes. First Sergeant Davis was waiting by the door. A brief nod. Gale with me. An edge of dread cut through Mark. The first sergeant's eyes were grim. Inside the battalion commander's office, Captain Raymond's expressionless calm filled the room. Along with the captain, two civilians sat there, a man and a woman in sharp suits. Sid flashed through Mark's mind. His heart skipped. Captain Raymond motioned Mark to the chair in front of the desk. The commander rested his folded hands and looked over his glasses, unreadable. Sergeant Gale, he began in an official tone, investigators from the Criminal Investigation Division have reached out to us. This concerns a possible leak of sensitive information connected to you. Mark felt everything inside him cinch tight. Not this. Not now. A leak? He asked, unable to hide his surprise. The man in the suit, a lean, 40-year-old agent, leaned forward. Sergeant, I'm Agent Richard Collins, and this is Agent Anna Torres. The woman gave a small nod. We have questions about your home computer network, Collins went on, opening a folder. Yesterday, we detected that confidential Army data was transmitted from an IP address registered in your name, he said clearly, glancing from the papers to Mark. We traced the leak to your home network. Please confirm that the network is yours. Stunned, Mark nodded. Yes, I've got home Wi-Fi in my name. He swallowed the lump in his throat. But I just got back from the training center. I've been away for 3 weeks and wasn't at home that whole time. Agent Torres, a note of skepticism in her voice, asked, Can you prove that? Captain Raymond cut in. Sergeant Gale was indeed at the National Training Center and only returned yesterday. We have the orders and all documentation. Torres nodded. Collins asked, Who had access to your network while you were gone? Mark exhaled, trying to pull his thoughts together. Only my wife, Emma, was at the house. As far as I know, no one else was supposed to be on the internet. He fell silent, yesterday's scene flaring back. Heat hammered at his temples. Although, he hesitated, then continued, Last night I found someone in my house. Turns out that while I was away, my wife didn't exactly pine for me. The words were jagged. Mark felt his commander's startled gaze. The agents listened closely. Who was this other person? Collins asked at once. Mark squared his shoulders. A man named Troy Colber, a civilian IT contractor. He set up our home internet a while back. I discovered he's been involved with my wife. He could have used the network when he was at my house. Agent Torres tapped rapidly at her tablet. Collins followed up. You encountered him yesterday. Under what circumstances? Mark's jaw muscles tightened. Personal, unpleasant circumstances, he said, cutting a controlled glance toward the commander. I came home and found my wife with him in my bed. Silence settled over the office. First Sergeant Davis looked away, and Captain Raymond said simply, I'm sorry, Sergeant. Mark dipped his head. Talking about this in front of his chain of command hurt, but now it was part of an official matter. Agent Collins rubbed his chin, thoughtful. If the contractor had access to the house and network, it's entirely possible he's involved in the leak. Torres added, We already obtained a warrant and seized your home computer and router for analysis. We interviewed your wife yesterday. Mark looked at her in surprise. Torres continued, "Your wife said she knows nothing about a leak. She confirmed you were not home and that this Colbert sometimes stopped by as a family friend." Mark gripped the chair arms. Family friend. The bitter irony of it. Collins exchanged a look with his partner. "At this time you are not charged, but the situation is serious. Please do not leave post without permission and make yourself available to investigators. If you recall anything else details about Colbert or any odd issues with your devices, notify us immediately." Captain Raymond added quietly, "Sergeant, during the investigation you're suspended from duties involving classified material. For now, handle paperwork in the headquarters." There was no sympathy in his tone, just duty. Mark swallowed another blow, now to his reputation. "Understood, sir," he said, keeping his voice even. The SID agent stood. "Thank you for your cooperation," Collins said, shaking Mark's hand. Torres handed him her card. "If you remember or learn anything, call the number there." They gathered their files and left. Captain Raymond watched them go, then spoke to Mark more gently. "It's a tough situation, Sergeant. I recommend full cooperation and keeping yourself under control. I hope we get to the bottom of it quickly." "Yes, Captain," Mark answered curtly, rising. The floor felt unsteady. Yesterday, a hit straight to the heart. Today, a stain of suspicion that he'd betrayed his oath. He walked out beside First Sergeant Davis. "Hang in there, Mark," Davis muttered. "If you need anything, I'm here." Mark nodded faintly. Words failed him. In the span of a single day, his life had collapsed into rubble, and somehow he would have to climb out. Outside the headquarters, Mark couldn't quite catch his breath. His chest felt squeezed as after a marathon, though his legs barely moved. Automatically, he turned toward a small green space between admin buildings, wooden benches under tall poplars, a place where people grabbed a minute's peace. The morning air was cool and smelled of fresh cut grass. Mark lowered himself onto a bench, braced his elbows on his knees, and stared at the ground. What now? His hands curled into fists on their own. "Mark," a surprised woman's voice asked nearby. He looked up. Lieutenant Nora Whitfield stood there in field uniform, the name tape on her chest reading Whitfield. Warm concern lit her brown eyes. Mark got to his feet, a little unsteady. "Lieutenant Whitfield, Nora." His voice came out rough. Nora gave a small, lopsided smile. "Just Nora. We're not on the parade ground." There was warmth in her voice. They'd served together in Afghanistan. A few years back, she'd been a young intel officer. He'd been a corporal in an engineer platoon. Patrols, joint briefings, sleepless nights on base, those had bonded them as teammates. Mark had already been married to Emma then, so he and Nora had stayed strictly friends, even if a spark of something more occasionally flickered, something neither of them ever acknowledged. "Good to see you," Nora said softly, studying him. "But you don't look great. Did something happen?" Mark sighed and dropped his gaze. There was no point hiding anything. Word about an investigation would spread anyway. And the personal stuff, he hesitated, then the need to speak one out. "I'm having, to put it mildly, a terrible day," he admitted quietly, "and I don't even know where to start." Nora sat beside him and brushed a stray strand of chestnut hair from her forehead. "Start at the beginning," she said simply. Her presence steadied him. Mark had always valued her level head and the way she showed up. With her, he felt like a friend, not a subordinate. Slowly, he began. "Last night, I came back from the range and found my wife with someone else." Saying it made his chest clamp down. Nora inhaled sharply and touched his shoulder in sympathy. "I'm so sorry," Mark nodded. "And that's not even all. This morning they called me and turns out there's a case. Sid is investigating a leak from my home network." Nora stared at him, stunned. "What?" Mark tried for a smile with no joy in it. "I can't believe it either. They say someone pushed documents out using my internet. I was out on duty, and now I'm a suspect. The story is, somebody used my Wi-Fi to pull data." "And they think it's you?" she burst out, indignant. "You were nowhere near home." "Yeah, but on paper I'm a suspect until they find who did it. Mark lifted a shoulder. There is one lead, the guy who was with Emma. He's an IT contractor, could have had access to my computer. I told the investigators about him, so now they'll be looking for Kolber. Nora knit her brows. What's his name? Troy Kolber, Mark said. Do you know him? No, doesn't ring a bell among our folks. But if he's a civilian contractor, they can find him through the database, she said with confidence. I hope they sort it out fast and clear your name. Mark rubbed a hand over his face. Hoping is one thing, waiting is another. He trailed off. Nora hesitated, then set a hand on his shoulder. I know it's rough, but you're not alone. If you need help or just to talk, I'm here. Mark met her eyes. There was no rank between them now, just two old friends who'd weathered hard times together. He managed a faint smile. Thank you, Nora. I really need your support. She gave his shoulder the faintest squeeze and pulled her hand back so as not to draw extra attention in front of the soldiers. Where are you staying right now? You do have a house, she asked carefully. I'm definitely not going back there. It's too filthy, let those memories stay hers. I don't know what's next, Mark exhaled. I spent the night in the barracks. After this, I'll probably rent a place if the investigation drags on. Nora nodded. I understand. Listen, I have a friend, a captain in the JAG Corps. You can get advice on what to do. While you're under investigation, you have the right to an attorney. Mark was taken aback amid the chaos. He hadn't thought about legal help. You think it's worth it? He asked. It won't hurt. At least learn your rights and the possible outcomes, she replied. I can set up a meeting if you'd like. Mark heard genuine care in her voice. If you'll help, I'd be grateful, he said quietly. Nora stood. Deal. I'll text you when and where to meet my attorney friend. For now, she checked the time. I've got to get to a briefing. Mark stood too. Just a few minutes of talking, and the weight on his chest felt a little lighter. Thanks for hearing me out, he said, meeting her warm gaze. Hang in there, Sergeant, she answered half-jokingly, giving him a crisp little salute with a friendly smile. He bowed his head in return, a faint smile touching his lips for the first time in the past 24 hours. When Nora left, Mark felt a spark of hope kindle inside. She had appeared just when he needed it most. He blew out a breath, squared his shoulders, and headed off to tackle his new, if humiliatingly clerical, duties at headquarters. He had to ride out this storm. The next day, after his talk with Nora, Mark decided to swing by home to pick up his personal things. He couldn't avoid running into Emma forever. During his lunch break, he got permission to step away from HQ for 1 hour and drove to his house. Emma opened the door herself. She must have taken the day off after everything that had happened. She looked exhausted, eyes red from crying, face pale. Mark, she began softly. He gave a restrained nod. I came to grab my things. Emma stepped aside. He headed upstairs to the bedroom where their wardrobe stood. She followed him. Mark, we need to talk, she said quietly as he pulled a suitcase down from the shelf. About what? He tossed over his shoulder without turning. Emma stopped in the doorway, arms folded across her chest. About us, about what happened, her voice trembled. Mark began packing his uniform, civilian clothes wordless. His heart clenched with pain, but he held himself together. After a night alone, the sharp anger had cooled, leaving only emptiness. There's nothing left to say between us, he said at last, zipping the suitcase. I'm filing for divorce. You know that now, and you knew it when you got into bed with him. It was only a matter of time before I found out. Emma nodded, wiping tears from the corners of her eyes. I know. Just please listen. I'm sorry. I made a terrible mistake. I was disappointed, lonely, but that's no excuse. Forgive me. Mark set the suitcase on the floor. He looked at the woman he had once loved more than anything. Now he felt only a quiet ache. I'm not your judge, Emma. You made your choice. Forgive you? He shook his head. I don't know if I can. You destroyed what we had. Emma sniffled. I understand. She lowered her gaze. For a few seconds, both were silent. At last, Mark broke the quiet. There are questions I need answers to. He spoke evenly, controlled. Troy Colber, who is he to you? Emma laced her fingers nervously. We met half a year ago. He came to fix the internet. Then sometimes he'd stop by for coffee. I was lonely, and at first we just talked. And then, she faltered, then it went too far. Mark gave a crooked smile. Half a year, and you said a few months. Emma nodded, guilty. I was scared. You were so angry yesterday. With good reason, he snapped dryly. He shifted from the personal to the official. Did Sid investigators come here yesterday? Emma straightened. Yes. 2 of them arrived, said they were from the Army's Criminal Investigation Division. They showed a search warrant. They took your computer and the router. They asked if I knew anything about a leak. And what did you tell them? Mark asked carefully. That I didn't know anything, she sighed. I really didn't. Emma met his eyes. Troy was here one day when you were gone. He asked to use your laptop, said he needed to check his work email. I didn't think anything of it, and when the agents came yesterday, I remembered and asked Troy about it. Mark's heartbeat thudded louder. And what did he say? Emma bit her lip. At first he said it was nothing, he just checked his email. But I pushed, and he admitted he forwarded some file. He said it was no big deal and none of my business. He begged me not to tell anyone. Said you'd never find out anyway, and he really needed it for work. Mark's eyes narrowed. He used my computer to steal data? Rage crept into his voice. Emma lowered her head. It seemed so. I didn't understand what he was doing. I thought it was just something for work. And now, her voice broke. Mark turned away, fists clenched. So Troy had not only wrecked his marriage, he had deliberately dragged him into a crime. Why didn't you tell the investigators right away? He asked sharply. Emma flushed. I was scared. Troy told me to keep quiet. And you walked out, you wouldn't even listen. Tears ran down her cheeks again. Mark let out a heavy sigh. Yes, yesterday he hadn't given her a chance to speak. But would she have said it then? It didn't matter now, the important thing was he knew the truth. Listen, Emma, he said firmly. You need to tell Sid everything immediately. It will make things easier for you if it turns out you kept something back. She started. Do you think I'm in trouble? I didn't know. I don't know, Mark said grimly. But it's better to come clean than wait for them to figure it out themselves. Emma nodded, wiping her eyes. You're right. I'll call the agent who left his card today. Footsteps sounded downstairs. The front door opened with a key. Mark tensed. Troy Colber appeared in the bedroom doorway. He looked irritated. Emma, what is going on? Why aren't you answering? He began, but when he saw Mark, he fell abruptly silent. For a moment, Mark froze, then in one leap, he put himself between Emma and the uninvited guest. You've got the nerve to show up here, he said quietly, but his voice was edged with danger. The same fury as yesterday flared hot in his chest. Colber recoiled half a step, then tried to bluff. I came to talk to Emma, and you, I see, are packing, he smirked. Mark trembled with contained rage. Talk, after what you've done, he could barely hold himself in check. You used my wife and my home for your dirty business. Troy feigned surprise. What are you talking about? He drawled innocently. Mark stepped toward him. You know exactly what. The information leak, Troy. Sid is already onto you. He was bluffing, but he saw Colber's face twitch. You're crazy. You've got no proof, Troy rasped, fear quivering in his voice. Emma told me everything, Mark shot back. She saw you copying files. From behind Mark's shoulder, Emma whispered, Troy, I told him the truth. Colber flashed a furious look at her. You stupid bitch. He lunged forward, but Mark shoved him back toward the door at once, shielding his wife. Don't, Mark said coolly, closing the distance on the traitor. If I were you, I'd run. Sid probably already has a warrant. Give it another minute, and I'll call them myself and tell them you're here." Colbert crumpled in on himself. Suddenly, he spun around and bolted down the stairs, sprinting outside. Mark rushed after him and caught sight of Troy diving into his car. The vehicle screeched away around the corner, panic pushing the speed. Mark stood on the porch, breathing hard, adrenaline roaring in his blood. He had to notify Sid, flashed through his mind. He pulled out his phone and dialed Agent Collins's number from the card. He gave a brief report. Colbert had just shown up at the house but fled and was likely trying to hide. The agent told him to stay put and wait for a patrol. Mark went back into the hallway. Emma stood leaning against the wall, arms wrapped around herself. She was shaking. "Are you okay?" Mark asked evenly. "I don't know," she whispered. "I didn't think he was capable of that." "I didn't think you were either," Mark said darkly. He picked up his suitcase. "Be ready, the investigators may come back and question you again." Emma wiped her eyes and nodded. "I'll tell them everything. And I'm sorry, Mark." He only sighed. "Take care of yourself, Emma." He had nothing more to say. He wanted to get out as fast as possible. The air in that house had turned bitter. Within a few minutes, the military police arrived. Mark laid out the situation succinctly and gave a written statement, after which he was authorized to leave the scene. He climbed into his car, tossing the suitcase onto the back seat. His heart pounded like mad from anger and nerves both. But there was a certain satisfaction too. Colbert had panicked. Now he definitely wouldn't wriggle out of it. Mark had done the right thing. He hadn't let his fists do the talking. Instead, he brought in the investigators. He badly wanted to punish the traitor with his own hands, but he knew justice had to run its course under the law, or he himself would end up behind bars. That evening, Mark called Nora. She picked up almost at once, and he briefly told her about the day, his talk with Emma, Colbert's appearance, and his escape. Nora listened closely, then said, "Come over. You need rest, and I need to see with my own eyes that you're okay." Her concern moved Mark to the core. He accepted the invitation, almost feeling the tension of the past hours ease just at the sound of her voice. Nora lived in a one-bedroom apartment off base, in a quiet residential neighborhood. Mark parked by a low brick building and climbed to the third floor. The door opened as soon as he knocked. Clearly Nora had checked the peephole and was waiting. "Come in," she said softly. Her place was cozy, warm lamplight, 2 steaming mugs of tea on the kitchen table. Suddenly Mark felt just how bone-tired he was. His whole body ached from stress. He wanted nothing more than to sink into something soft and finally exhale. "You're right on time, the tea's still hot." Nora took his hand lightly and led him to the table. Mark sat and wrapped his palms around the mug. "Thank you," he murmured. For a few minutes they sat in silence. Mark warmed his fingers on the cup and took sips of mint tea. At last Nora broke the quiet. "How are you holding up?" Mark shrugged. "Honestly, the day was hell." He met her eyes. "But it feels like we're heading for a resolution now. They'll catch Colbert for sure. He'll make dumb moves in a panic." Emma promised to tell the investigators everything. Nora nodded. "Good. You did everything right." Mark rubbed his tired face with his hands. "I don't know how I would have gotten through this without you, Nora. Your support, it means a lot to me." Nora gave a small smile. "That's what friends are for." Her eyes held more than mere friendly concern, but Mark couldn't tell whether it was real or just his exhausted imagination. "You're more than a friend," he said softly. The words slipped out. Nora's eyebrows lifted in surprise, and Mark hurried to add, "I mean, you've always mattered to me. Ever since Afghanistan. I was married then and wouldn't let myself think about it." He looked away into the dark window. "But now things are different." Nora set down her cup. Mark's heart hammered. Had he said too much? He didn't want to ruin the trust between them. But she gently covered his hand with hers. "Mark, I felt something too. Back then and after as well. But I respected your boundaries." He turned back to her. Warmth and worry both shimmered in her eyes. I don't want to take advantage of how vulnerable you are right now, she whispered. You're hurting after a betrayal, and I don't want to be just a comfort on the rebound. Mark shook his head and closed his other hand over hers. You're not an escape from pain, Nora. You're the bright thing in my life right now. He spoke from the heart. Every word resonated in his chest. Yes, I'm struggling, but what I feel for you is real, not just fallout from today. Believe me, I've had years to figure myself out. Nora searched his face as if trying to read the truth in his eyes. Slowly, she exhaled in relief. I believe you. Silence fell again, but a different kind now, heavy with what neither had said aloud. Mark gave her fingers a gentle squeeze. I don't know what comes next, he whispered, but I do know I want you in my life. Nora rose from the table without letting go of his hand and whispered, I'm here. She stepped closer, and Mark's heart kicked into a wild gallop, the quickening that stoked a fire inside. He stood too, suddenly close enough to feel her warmth. His fingertips brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. Nora leaned into his palm, inviting more. He traced her cheek, drinking in the velvet of her skin. Nora, he breathed, rough with feeling. She pressed closer, dissolving the last barriers. Their lips met in a kiss that flared instantly from tenderness to flame, making up for years of hidden fire. Their embrace tightened, a tremor running through them both, their hearts drumming in frantic unison. Nora's hands slid along his shoulders, moving lower as if to ground herself in the reality of him. They moved toward the couch without breaking apart. Mark sat and drew her onto his lap. Kisses spilled down her neck, his fingers tangling in her hair, holding tight. Desire swelled like lava. Clothes flew into the dark. They tumbled into the bedroom in a whirlwind of touch. On the bed, Mark eased her onto the pillows. The night light gilded her skin, tracing alluring lines. He bent to her, his hand roaming slowly. Their mouths met again, then wandered lower in waves of heat that washed away everything but this blazing want. She whispered his name, her face a light rising from tension to bliss. Mark drank in every movement, every breath. When it was over, he gathered her close and kissed her temple. Their breathing steadied, hearts still pulsing in sync. Nora spoke first, whispering, I waited for this moment for so long without daring to hope it could really happen. Mark stroked her hair. Yeah. He realized that for the first time in a long while, he felt exactly where he belonged. Nora lifted her head and looked him in the eye. What do we do now? We both know relationships like this are against the rules. There was worry in her voice. Mark nodded, turning serious. I know. We didn't act by the book, but I don't regret it. He traced a gentle line along her cheek with his finger. By the rules, we have to notify the chain of command about us. Nora gave a sad little smile. That could mean the end of our service. Not necessarily, he said. They might just separate us into different units. Or, worst case, I'll request a transfer or even leave the army if I have to. I won't put you at risk, but I can't lose you either. Don't you dare talk about resigning, Nora shot back warmly. You're a damn good soldier. The army needs people like you. Mark chuckled softly. But I need you. His words hung in the air, and she, holding her breath, watched him. We'll figure something out, she said at last, more confidently. The main thing is to do this honestly. I'm ready to talk to my commander and explain. I hope they won't be too harsh since we're coming forward ourselves. Mark pulled her into an embrace. Let's leave it for tomorrow. Nora sighed with relief and rested her head on his chest. Mark felt her warmth, breathed in the scent of her hair, and was sure things would be okay. 2 weeks passed. They were hard on Mark, but in the end, everything fell into place. Troy Colber was arrested after 3 days. The SID agents caught him at the state line as he tried to run. Under the weight of the evidence and Emma's testimony, he confessed to the data leak. Just as Mark had suspected, Colber had used his computer and the home Wi-Fi to copy documents and sell them to a private firm that handled military procurement bids. Now Colber was awaiting trial, and Mark had been officially cleared of any suspicion. Captain Raymond shook his hand in person and said, I'm glad you're innocent, Sergeant. I believed in you." Those words were a balm to Mark. Things at home started moving too. Mark filed for divorce. Emma moved out to her sisters in another city. Their last conversation was brief and courteous. They both knew the marriage couldn't be saved, and for years they hadn't been a real couple so much as housemates. Mark held no grudge. The betrayal had left a scar, but he chose to let the past go and focus on the future. The most important step was the paperwork he and Nora submitted about their relationship. It was nerve-wracking. Mark walked into Captain Raymond's office, and Nora went to her lieutenant colonel in intel, and they both reported honestly that something personal had begun between them. The command responded sternly. Mark faced an unpleasant talk with his commander and his first sergeant. They reminded him of the regulations and the risks each of them was taking. Nora's superior questioned her at length as well, ultimately expressing disappointment. But the fact that they had come forward on their own worked in their favor. Since there was no direct supervisory relationship, the punishment was limited to a formal reprimand and separating them into different units. Their units were not in a direct chain of command anyway, so there was no conflict of interest. Captain Raymond made it crystal clear to Mark. One more misstep, and he'd have to say goodbye to his position. Mark accepted that rules are rules, and he was prepared to own his choice. Nora was transferred to another intelligence section within the same division away from Mark's outfit, so their duties wouldn't intersect. Mark, at his own request, was transferred as well to another battalion. New unit, new responsibilities, new team, but he didn't mind starting fresh. The reactions from the ranks were mixed. Some ribbed him, some sympathized, and his closest friends backed him, glad he'd found someone who made him happy. That evening, once the formalities were behind them, Mark and Nora met off duty, now officially as a couple who no longer had to hide. They chose a quiet little restaurant near the base where no coworker would bother them. They sat on the patio under the evening sky. Mark held Nora's hand across the table, catching the reflections of the lights in her brown eyes. He felt calm and light. "I can't believe we can finally just be together like this," Nora said with a smile. "Oh, I can," Mark answered gently. "We've earned it." He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it softly. Nora blushed and glanced around with a teasing look. Careful, Sergeant public displays of affection. Mark laughed quietly. "Sorry, ma'am. Won't happen again," he winked. They both burst out laughing, for the first time joking about it without fear. The evening went on. They talked about everything: weekend plans, favorite movies, funny stories from the service. They made plans, now shared ones. When the restaurant had nearly emptied and the stars stood out sharper overhead, Mark and Nora walked out hand in hand. By her car, Mark stopped and drew her gently to him. "You know, I haven't felt like this he said, looking into her eyes. "This is all you." Nora laid her palm on his chest, where his heart beat steady and calm beneath the thin shirt. "We're feeling it together," she replied. "You gave me something I never expected to find in the Army: real love." "I love you, Nora," he said simply, clearly, for the first time out loud. She smiled, happy tears bright in her eyes. "And I love you, Mark." They kissed tender and sure. Mark wrapped his arms around the woman he loved and held her tight. "Shall we go home?" Nora asked softly, brushing her nose against his cheek. "Let's go," Mark nodded. "Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out. This is nothing compared to what's coming next. And if you're under 18, don't even think about clicking next.